I'm doing a series on the fruit of the Spirit. And if you missed the first one I did, it was on love. This is going to be on joy. Look at Galatians 5. If you want to turn to that, that's kind of using as my benchmark or springboard of what we have there in Galatians 5:22. And I'll read from there in just a moment. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's coming to the end of his ministry. And as I'm going to read here in a minute, it's not going to be from Galatians. So let me go ahead and read that one, just as I said, as the springboard. And you get an idea of what's going to be coming up and which ones you want to listen to and which ones you don't. You're welcome to do that. Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit, fruit, not spruits. There's 9 qualities. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying each other. So that's kind of the idea of the springboard of where I'm getting there. But Jesus is coming to the end of his ministry. And Jesus kind of says this to his disciples. This is John's paraphrase. Remember the Sermon on the Mount? You remember the Beatitudes? You remember the commandments that I've been giving you? You remember all the principles I've been laying out for you? I want to tell you why I've been giving those to you. And so he turns to John 15. In verse 11, I want you to listen to what he said. And if you want to turn to that, you're welcome to. We're going to go over in John 15 as well as John 16. And this is part of that fruit, one of the qualities that's listed there. John 15:11, and I like it here in the Bible pages. I know I put it up sometimes for some of them, but listen to what he says. I have told you this, so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. My joy and your joy. And Jesus wants to complete it. Bring the two together here. If you have one of those red-lettered Bibles, and you know those are the words of Jesus, you could almost say every one of the time that you see the red letters, Jesus is saying, that's my joy. The reason I gave the Sermon on the Mount is because I want you to have my joy. The reason I did the miracles and taught the principles is I want you to have my joy. As I'm talking about this, I bet you some of you are ticked off. As I preach this message, you're sitting there thinking, preacher, you're telling me to be joyful, and you don't know who I'm married to. You're telling me to be joyful, and I haven't had a paycheck in a month, or 6 months, or a year. You're telling me to be joyful, preacher? And I'm in the middle of a ferocious battle with cancer. You're telling me to be joyful? You don't even have a clue what I'm going through. You're right. Let me try to lower the blood pressure just a little bit. And I understand right now, maybe that things aren't going too well in your life. I understand some of you this morning that things are not working out just the way you planned. Therefore, you might be resenting the fact that I'm calling you to be joyful, or that God's calling us to be joyful as we look in the Scriptures. The question is not, are you going to have bad days? We all have bad days. It's when we have those bad days, or those bad weeks, or those bad months, or you might even say year or years. That's not the question. When you have those bad days, how are you going to respond? You think I got it riled up to listen to this. Here's what James says in chapter 1, verse 2. He says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds. I mean, James says, bring it on. Welcome them when they're there. Oh no, the bad news hits, and the bad days, he says, Consider it pure joy. That's contrary to the world. The world wants to come back and say, you've had a streak of bad luck. And before I get into this message on joy, some of you are already confused. You think I'm talking about happiness. No, I'm not. Happiness and joy are not the same thing. Big, big difference. Happiness is external. Joy is internal. Happiness is based on chance. For things like this, if something good happens, then I'm happy. How many were happy when the Cubs won the World Series? How many were not? Probably Cardinal fans. How many were happy when the Eagles won the Super Bowl? Woo! That's my team. See, it's based on chance. Joy is based on choice. Happiness is based on circumstances. Joy depends on Christ. Get the difference. I hope it comes through this morning. The question that I want to try to answer this is, how do you become joyful? 24/7. How do you do that when the world around you is caving in, when things are crumbling down, and how do you maintain your status quo, your even keel, and your joy? Boy, you missed a Sunday school lesson this morning. I thought we'd get an amen or two out of that one. You've missed a couple of many of them. I don't mean, Joanne preached a couple of weeks ago. It was better than my sermon that day.
Amen.
Oh, you didn't preach. I'm sorry, teach. That's what I'm doing. Joanne taught a Sunday school lesson this morning. It knocked it out of the ballpark.
Amen.
And it's better than my sermon this morning. Goes along with it in the idea of, my idea of joy, though, and the fruit of the Spirit. Can I be honest with you? Some of you are not there. Some of you get great joy being miserable. Some of you get great joy getting other people to be miserable with you. If you're here today and you're thinking, Pastor, I'd rather go through life joyful than miserable. I'd rather go through life with a smile on my heart than a frown on my face. Here's what I want you to do. 3 simple things. They're difficult, but they're really not hard. Being joyful, and Jesus gives us these things, and he points them out as he's listing them. We're going to look at them. Number 1, he says this. Did I miss that one? I'm sorry. I see that up there. Oh, I must have skipped a whole page here, because that's the thing I want you to take out the door with you right there. Put it back up there. Thank you. I just looked up. Once I choose Christ, I can always choose joy. It does not come till you have Christ. That's important. You will not have joy until you have Christ in your life. Jesus tells how we can be joyful and what it can look like. And if you're here today and you're thinking that, Pastor, I don't know how in the world he can do that. Let me see if I can help you today with these 3 things that Jesus shares with his disciples right near the end of his ministry. Because here's what's going to happen. He's going to leave them. He's going to be gone. He says, I'm going to not be around for 3 days. Doesn't put it that way exactly. He says for a little while. We'll look at it. And here's the first thing that you need to put down there. Decide to be joyful. It's a conscious decision that you make every day. John 16, if you want to flip over. And while you turn to that section in the Bible, here's what he's doing. He's going to go to the cross. He's been telling them. He's been setting his face to Jerusalem. He's been saying, for this reason came I into this world, that I might save sinners. They knew he was going to be the Savior of the world. They knew he was going to die. And he kept telling them, this is where we're headed, and eventually it's coming. It's kind of like this. I put it down. I wonder how Corey and Sherry felt when Derek said, I'm going into the service. Was there joy right away, or was there anxiety? And how did they feel the day that he says, bye? I mean, I bet their hearts sank. I mean, he's been with them for 18 years, or I don't know long. About that, I'm thinking like my boy. And now he's going to be gone. And Jesus says, I'm going to be gone for a little while. How about your child going off to college? Anybody's kids move across the United States to some other state? Doesn't your heart kind of go out there and wonder how things are going with them? This is the picture Jesus has given them. Your child moving out on their own, family far away, and come for visit, and they stay with you, and you're glad you see them, and you almost hate the time that you know is going to come, that you're going to have to hug each other, kiss each other, and say goodbye, because you don't know the next time you're going to be seeing them. That's what's happening. Time for him to go to the cross, and he's warning his disciples one more time, 16:16. In a little while, you will see me no more. There it is. And then after a little while, you're going to see me. Put in the parentheses or out in your margin, he's going to go to the cross, rise from the dead, and then come back. And some of the disciples said to one another, what does he mean? By saying in a little while, you'll see me no more, and then after a little while, you will see me. Because I'm going to my Father. They kept asking, what does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he's saying. And Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, you're asking one another what I meant when I said, in a little while you'll see me no more. And then in a little while you will see me. I'll tell you the truth. You will weep, you'll mourn, while the world rejoices. You'll grieve, but your grief will turn to what? He's obviously talking about two different things. Anybody have a clue what they are? I kind of gave them to you, the crucifixion and the resurrection. First thing he says, in a little while you're not going to see me, and then he says in a little while I'm going to be back. And when I do, something's going to happen while I'm gone. He says, in those 3 years that I've been here, I've been telling you all of this was going to happen. At some day, it was going to happen. Maybe you dreaded it coming. Maybe you hated the idea of it coming and being there, but he says, there's going to be a time you're going to be without me. And I'm not going to be there to hold your hand. I'm not going to be there to answer your questions. I'm not going to be there to pull you out of the boat in the storm like we were talking about this morning with them being in the boat. I'm not going to be there to feed your hungry people. I'm not going to be there to raise your kids from the dead. I'm not going to be there to heal your fever. You're going to have to be without me. He doesn't tell them this directly, but it'll be for 3 days. You'll be totally and completely on your own. I'm just going away for a little while, and then I'm coming back. And many times in the Gospels, you said over and over this was going to happen. In fact, you remember what Peter said? No, you're not. Jesus said, it's now that we go. And he wanted to stand up, and he wanted to defend him right there in the garden. They had a different idea of what the Messiah was going to be like. We believe you're one of the prophets they talked about. We believe you're the one sent from God. We believe you're the Son of God. And sons of God don't die. And Jesus tells them once again, nobody, not even the Son of God, is immune to sorrow and suffering. Jesus isn't even immune to it. So why should we? Bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And Jesus gives us this hope in verse 20. I tell you the truth. You will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. That's an amazing statement. If you grasp what Jesus is saying, there are going to be times in your life when even if you decide to love God and follow God and give Him 100% of your life and serve Him and love Him and worship Him, there are going to be times when you're bawling. Your eyes out and the world's going to be laughing it up. There'll be times when you can't stop the tears from flowing while the world can't stop themselves from laughing. However, in the midst of your grief, Jesus says, I am going to give you my joy. Again, understand what Jesus is saying. You can decide to be joyful even in the midst of sorrow. Like we were looking at this morning where Jesus said, we're going to go over to the other side. And later on you read, for example, I'm going to use the book of Mark. We looked at Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Mark said in the end of chapter 4, I believe it's chapter 4, he says, we're going to go over to the other side. They're going to cross the Lake of Galilee. And then you read in chapter 5, it says, and when they got to the other side. But all the stuff that happened in the morning, in between, the storm coming up, the boat rocking, the waves were coming over it, all the stuff that happened. And some of the disciples got fearful and forgot. And what a great example was pointed out here. It wasn't just, some of them even said, what kind of man is this that he can even calm the winds of the wave? He's the one, if you know the story, where he spoke to the winds and he said, quiet, be still. The better translation is, as Joanne was pointing out this morning, he's saying, shut up, be still. And he's speaking to the wind and the waves and the storm, the squall, as some of the translations put it. It was a hurricane. And they all turned to one another and said, what kind of man is this? You see how quick they forgot who it was? Not a man. That was God in that boat. I mean, they called him Lord. They heard him, saw him do miracles, saw the things that he did. How quick we forget when we're in the midst of a storm or something going on in our life, and it's different for everybody here. We don't know what our journey is, and that's what Jesus is trying to let them know here. And he says, will you decide to have joy no matter what comes upon you? Let's read on. Some of you are looking at me like I always say, where a raccoon looks at truck headlights. Look at verse 21. A woman, he says, he proves how this can happen. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. I adopted 2 boys, Joanne and I. I didn't get to be present for their adoption or see their birth. See their birth. My son David did. He had to leave the room, the delivery room. He couldn't handle it. My son Mark was there, and he just bawled like a baby, knowing and seeing a little mark Jack in his hands. Couldn't believe it. Everything I've heard and read about a baby being born, the pain, the labor that's involved, guess what? Once that child comes out and into this world, mom sees that child, the pain's forgotten. I mean, the joy overcomes the sorrow. Jesus is saying there's only one way that you can maintain joy in your life. When those difficult, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking moments come into your life. I lost my parents. I grieved at those. I lost my mother-in-law and father-in-law. I grieved at them. I've lost my uncle. That's passed. I've lost dear friends that I've grieved over. My co-worker with cancer, pancreatic cancer. That's when you make up your mind now, beforehand, that when troubles come, you're not going to focus on the trouble. You're going to focus on God, who's over the storm. Focused on his promises. I'm not going to keep my eye on what's happening to me. I'm going to keep my eye on the one who is over what's happening to me. Are you hearing me? All kinds of joy stealers. Let me give you just 3. Some of you are fighting these right now. A joy stealer is undeserved guilt. You're going through things from day to day, and all of a sudden you'll remember something you did as a kid or a teenager or in college, and all of a sudden these waves of guilt will come over you. You'll just remember something from the past, and all of a sudden you just think, I'm not worthy. And before you know it, your joy's gone. You're overwhelmed by undeserved guilt. They come upon us. Another one is uncertain consequences. You have the fear because you're in the circumstances right now and you're wondering, how am I going to get out of this mess? How am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to pay this bill? How am I going to make it to the end of the month? The pressure of the moment right now is overwhelming, and all of a sudden, your joy is gone. Another joy stealer is undetermined future. You're anxious. You're worried about what might happen tomorrow. We get the news from the doctor that maybe my blood work isn't back yet. He put my surgery off for a month. We had to put Joanne's scheduled doctor appointment with the back problem that she's having because of her bronchitis. And we just kind of put it off. Oh, how long is this going to be? I need to know the results right now. Will it be good or be bad? I've heard they're going to lay off people at the company or at the shop. And we worry. And all of a sudden our joy is gone. When you're in a situation and one of those things is stealing your joy, the guilt, the past, the present, the future, I want you to remember these three things. Your past has already been forgiven by a merciful God, if you're a Christian. Amen. See, he's talking to the Christian. You've surrendered your life to God. You've been buried with him in Christian baptism, and you're trying to live the Christian life in this world. And you're going to have the ups and downs and the things that the world wants to throw at you. You know what Satan's doing? He's doing his best, just like when you've been pushed at a pool and somebody pushes you and you want to grab them and take them in with you. You're going down. You're going to take him with. That's exactly what Satan's doing. He's going down. And he wants to take you with him and pull you right down there. And so another thing is, even when you need to realize that your sins are forgiven, they were done at the cross when Jesus died on the cross and rose again. Amen? Amen. Your present is being controlled by a sovereign God. He's in control. Even in the midst of all the waves and the up and downs and the news we're hearing on TV and read about, and all of a sudden our blood pressure just goes up and down like a thermometer. Remember this, your future is already guaranteed by a loving God. That's what Jesus is telling them. Their future is guaranteed. John 14, he's telling his disciples one of the times that he's going to leave them. And you've read this, John 14 verse 1. It's read a lot of times at funerals. Anybody have a little subscript right above that? What we're going to read about the first three verses there in John 14? Jesus what? Comforts his disciples. Look at this. Do you not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. Or you've heard it, mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. And I'm going to prepare a place. Who? Who for? You. Oh, that's pretty weak. You. He's going to prepare it for you, Christian. You that surrendered your life to God. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'm going to come back and take you with me, that you also may be where I am. He's guaranteed our future, that we'll be with him. And if you keep those three things in mind, you can say, I can be joyful in the midst of the struggles and the hardship. Great verse in Hebrews. If you haven't read it, I want you to mark it down in Hebrews 12:2. Jesus is about to face the greatest pain, the greatest suffering, the greatest agony. He's going to the cross. And you've heard me say this. I think the hardest thing that Jesus did was not to be nailed to the cross and the hand in his hands and in his feet, or the pierced side, and the shedding of the blood, or the crown of thorns. The hardest thing with Jesus was to be separated from the Father. He said, up to now, the Father and I have been one. You've seen me, you've seen the Father. Now he's going to go to the cross, and he knows God can't look on him. God will have no part of sin, and he's going to become sin and die for us. In Hebrews 12, verse 2 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. He set the example. For the what? Joy. Joy. Set before him. He endured the cross. Look at that. Scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Question. How could Jesus endure the pain, the suffering, the heartache of being completely alone, totally separated from God, the Father that he had known throughout eternity? How could he do that with joy? Because he focused on the joy of knowing what were the results. His dying, his death, his resurrection. My Father's going to be glorified. My people are going to surrender their life to me, and they're going to be redeemed. Sins are going to be forgiven. And this world's going to be made right. He knew all this was going to happen by his going to the cross and rising from the grave. And he knew the results of going to the cross, dying for our sins. You see, sorrow is like cold air. When sorrow and suffering and heartache and pain come into your life, it's if you already beforehand know this and you've made up your mind and you say, I'm not going to let that take me down. It's like kicking on the hot air of the furnace of love in that time of despair. It'll just happen. And people will see that your life, what you're going through is incredible and different. They'll see a difference in your life as the way it is in the world. And the world takes all those things. We go, oh, woe is me. Look what's happened to me. And we get it out on Facebook. And we fall apart. There's an unshakable confidence of God's purpose, God's power, God's presence, and God's providence. Even in the midst of suffering, I'm going to decide today, I'm going to be joyful. Second thing, you desire to be joyful. You might think these things overlap a little bit, but I want to try to prove to you how I can do this. Maybe you're thinking, Johnny boy, you just can't desire it. Who do you think you are, Norman Vincent Peale with the power of positive thinking? Some of you go out and eat today after lunch in church. And you go out to the restaurant and you tell you what, you sit down and you order food. You know what kind of food you order? Food you enjoy, good food. Certain foods, certain drinks, different desserts based on the ones that we desire. And we buy things and build things because we think they'll bring us all kinds of joy. My question is this: where does that desire come from? Answer, it comes from God. If you want joy, God will give it to you if you ask Him for it. It's a gift. That's what Jesus is saying here. He says, here is my joy, and I want to give it to you and make it complete. Joy is not something you manufacture from within. It's something God gives you. It's something you receive from Him. You may think I'm crazy. You can't just choose it. Nobody chooses joy. Look at it again in verse 11, chapter 15. Flip back. I have told you this so that my joy, Jesus' joy, God's joy, may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. It's a gift. I want to give you my joy so that your joy can be complete. Every morning you get out of bed, you have the right and the ability to pray this prayer. Lord, today would you give me your joy, and would you make it joy complete? I think of it along the Lord's Prayer. Remember what Jesus said we do daily? We say, give us this day our daily what? Why can't I say, give me this day your joy? Make it complete in me. I don't know what's ahead. I don't know what's going to happen out there, but help me to maintain the joy. Listen, some of you sourpusses out there, you need to hear what I'm saying. You know who you are? You walk around like you're weaned on a dill pickle. How's it going? Okay, under the circumstances. Oh, Carmen Licardillo, I love that guy. A great singer. We had a video of him about a month ago when the raising of Lazarus. Carmen Licardillo says, then get out from under the circumstances. If you don't want to be joyful, plain and simple, you won't be. Joy does not come uninvited. If you get up in the morning and say, I choose not to be joyful, you won't be. Don't worry about it. Reminds me of the softball team. When I was doing umpiring in Macomb, and there was an adult softball team. Their motto was, we won't win and you can't make us. They were there just to have fun. They usually showed up. There was a 6, 7, 8, and 9 o'clock games. They hoped to come to the 8 and 9 o'clock game, and they wanted to be inebriated. They were out there to have fun. A lot of times I tossed half the players out. On the other hand, if you want to be joyful, you will be. If you choose to be joyful, you can be. But you have to choose it. It's not me. I'm not talking about waving a magic wand. Look at Psalms 118. Verse 24. You know it. I'll just look at it up here. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us what?
Rejoice.
Say that again. Let us what?
Rejoice.
You rejoice. You choose that. You decide. And be what?
Glad.
You choose that in it. Once I choose Christ, I can always choose to be joyful. I don't matter. I don't care what happens out there. It's a gift from God. And that's exactly what Jesus is illustrating here, giving them some kind of a benchmark and something to hang on to like an anchor. Paul said it this way in Philippians 4:4. He said, rejoice in the Lord always. And I will say it again, rejoice. He repeated it twice for a reason. But preacher, the economy's bad. My 401k is down. My blood work came back bad. The x-ray came out bad. My wife or my husband just walked out on me and my family. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. I know you can't always rejoice in your circumstances. I didn't say you wouldn't be happy. You won't be. You can't always rejoice in the economy. You can't always rejoice with a 401k. You can't always rejoice with your bank account. You can't always rejoice with your blood work. I get all that. But you rejoice in the midst of it and make the decision that no matter what else happens, I have my joy in the Lord. Number one, you decide to be joyful. Number two, there's a desire to be joyful. Do you want it or not? You desire it. And number three, you determine to be joyful. Determine on purpose. You don't determine with your feelings. You determine with your will. Happiness is the feeling. Whoever said, don't worry, be happy. That guy did a wax job on us. And he made a ton of money selling that thing. I can't remember who the singer was. Some of you know it right offhand. Don't worry, be happy. Suppose I went to the doctor tomorrow and I said, Doc, I'm not feeling too well. I feel terrible. He said, what's wrong? I said, nurse takes my temperature, says 103. Blood pressure's elevated. I'm burning up, my runny nose, watery eyes, and I'm shaking like a leaf. And all the doctor says, feel better. Are you kidding me? Honestly felt that way when I took Joanne to the doctor a couple times, or the ER. Trying to find out what's going on with her bronchitis, and they were doing everything else but treating the bronchitis. And then they say, now go on your way, okay. Hope you get better. Can you imagine somebody coming to see me as a pastor and said, I'm depressed? Well, I don't feel happy. And suppose I just say, well, just feel happy, bye-bye, have a good day. You know, that'd be the end of it right there. See, joy is different. 74 times the word's used in the New Testament. The word there is a delight in the heart that's based on a spiritual reality. That's where my joy comes from. I know there's a heaven that's prepared for me that Jesus talked about. I know that he died on the cross, that he arose again. I know that he said, and I will come and take you and receive you to where I am. Are you looking forward to that day?
Yeah.
Oh, kinda. No matter what. Because we're all going to go through the what? Some of you make believe pie in the sky, que sera, whatever it will be. Let me ask you a question. And it's a fair question. Why must a true Christ follower be joyful? Not why can you be or why should you be. The question is, you must be joyful. And the answer is, because God's joyful. That's his nature. That's a part of him. And you're getting the fruit of the Spirit, or a part of God, and that is joy. That's what Jesus meant when he said that it might be complete. Listen to this. I was reading this verse back in the Old Testament, Zephaniah 3:17, if you want to jot it down. I think I put it there for you, because it's a great verse. The Lord your God is with you. I mean, claim that one right there, no matter what. He is mighty to save. He takes great delight in you, He will quiet you. He'll calm you down. With His love, He will rejoice over you with what?
Singing.
Did you hear that? God sings over you. The Bible says the angels rejoice when one soul has been saved. There's great rejoicing and singing. This is unbelievable. The Hebrew word there, when it says delight, is to be jumping up and down. Like we do at ball games or some event, or somebody does something and we're just as happy as can be, and we got to express it. He's jumping up and down and overjoyed when we surrender our life to Him. In His love, He will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. What do we sing about? He sings about us. We've accepted Him. His love, His sacrifice of the cross Son. That we are in the family, that we love Him. Joy is not something you get from God. Joy is something you catch from God. He's contagious. It's all around. They're joyful, bubbly, laughing, good disposition. You go your way better than you did when you first met them. You ever been around people like that? You walk into the room, all of a sudden it just kind of oozes out of them and you just feel better later on. Not a happiness. Now, I know a lot of people that are happy without God. Anybody else know that? But you cannot be happy or cannot have joy without God. That's what Jesus is saying here. Happiness and joy are not the same thing. Joy comes from God. He goes on. Go back to chapter 16 in John, verse 22. So with you, now it's time for the grief. But I'll see you again. And you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. It's permanent. Nobody will take it away. Not even the stealers, the joy stealers. Look, I'm going to die, and that's why I came to this earth. 3 days, you're not going to see me. You'll be alone. You'll be without me. But guess what? I'm going to come back, and you're going to see me again like you've never seen me before. And when you do, two things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to rejoice. You're going to be glad to see me and know it. And the other thing that's going to happen even more is there will be greater joy in you because you've seen me. It'll be permanent. I mean, people, you determine to be joyful. You pay no attention to the weather. I don't care what days of the week it is. I don't care how old you are. I don't care about the economy or the interest rate or the deficit. They don't matter. Don't let them get you down. Determined to be joyful. Let me mention one other thing that will rob you of that joy. And this is huge of what he says right here. One thing and only thing that will rob you of your joy. It's sin. Chapter 15, verse 10. I'm backing up now. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love. Big if, big two-letter word. Just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remained in His love. He set the example. He says, if you obey me and remain in my love, just like I have obeyed my Father and remain in His love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Get this and don't miss it. Jesus ties this whole thing to obedience. Jesus says, let me tell you, this whole thing works. It isn't complicated. Plain and simple, kind of like this. When I tell you to do something, you do it. Are you ready for this? When you do it, you have a clear conscience. When you have a clear conscience, you won't feel guilty. You don't feel guilty, you're full of joy. And you'll be full of joy that I'm with you and right there with you. If you have sin in your life, you know something's wrong. You know something's separating you from God. You know when you did wrong. You know, when I knew that I had went to somebody's house, I'd been grounded by my dad and said, you don't go anywhere next Saturday, you stay home all day. And a friend of mine and another guy, I wasn't able to drive yet. I think I was 14, 13. But we were both seeing the same girl, kind of interested in this girl. And he was going to go see her. I said, no way in the world am I going to let him go see her without me. So I got on my bike and rode to see Cindy's house. Had lunch with Cindy and Larry. That's the other guy that was there. And then I got back by 2, 3 o'clock. That evening at dinner, Dad says, well, what'd you do today? And he talked to my brother, and he was telling him. He looks over at me and says, what'd you do today? I said, nothing. I was grounded. Lying right through my teeth. And my dad, we had to ask to be excused to leave the table when we were done. And when I did, I said, can I be excused? And Dad said, yeah, I'll go to your room. Heavy, heavy words. I mean, he was there probably in about 90 seconds, 2 minutes. But it seemed like eternity when I was waiting for him. You know why? Because I knew I hadn't obeyed him. There's something different when our countenance, when we know. I didn't know how my mom knew when I was lying. I didn't know how Mom knew I wasn't doing something right. Everybody was saying Monday, you could tell I was nervous. I didn't think I was nervous. See? Everybody going around, John, you're like a cat out on a hot tin roof. I guess I was just wanting things to come off okay and be all right, and to go smoothly. Jesus ties this whole thing right here when he says it all hinges on one thing, and that's our obedience to him. Listen, if you're not obeying him and you're not in a right relation to him, right now, today, where you are, I'm not talking about where you baptized 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Are you living for him today? Whatever we do in word and deed, we do it to the glory of God. The Bible says, today. And when I know that I have obeyed him to the best of my ability, and I've done it honored him the best of my ability, I don't have any guilt. I don't have any shame. There will be joy. And John 15:10, if you obey my commands, you'll remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. One more other way to look at this. Joy is a barometer of your relationship to God right now, today. If you really don't think you have a reason to be joyful today, and you're a follower of Jesus Christ, let me close with these words. A ticket to heaven, no seat can take. An eternal home, no divorce can break. Every sin of your life has been cast into the sea. Every mistake you make is nailed to the tree. You are blood-bought and heaven-made, a child God forever saved. So be grateful and joyful. For isn't it true? What you don't have is much less than what you do. Do you have joy? No matter what, you can. I can't give it. Church can't give it. But Jesus can, if you've given your life to him and you surrender to him in obedience. We're going to sing a song.